GST is a goods and services tax. It's an indirect tax. Today we have multiple tax system in India. Like there are taxes imposed by the federal government, there are taxes imposed by the state governments. The central government or the federal government imposes taxes on manufacture, and also they impose taxes on services. And the state governments impose tax on sale of goods, but they don't have the power to tax services. Similarly, the state governments would tax things like entertainment, luxury taxes, and so on. So there are multiple taxes prevalent in India today, some imposed by central government, some imposed by state governments. And GST is a tax system which will rationalize all these taxes and then consolidate these taxes into two taxes. One is the central GST, which will be imposed by the central government, and the state GST, which will be imposed by the state government. Thus, GST is a tax on goods and services, and it basically envisages a very simple and transparent tax system from the multiple tax system we have today. This is a question which everyone is asking, whether GST will be implemented on April 16 or not. The Lok Sabha passed the Constitution Bill in May 2015, and it was widely expected that the Constitution Amendment Bill will be passed by the Rajya Sabha also in May 15. But what happened in the Rajya Sabha was that it was referred to a select committee of Parliament who will examine and put up their recommendations. So as a result of this, the Constitution Bill will get passed in the Rajya Sabha sometime in end July or August. So considering the delay which has happened, it's a challenging task for the government to implement it from April 16, even though from the government side, they have been reiterating that April 16 deadline will be met. But considering the delay which has happened in passing of the Constitution Amendment Bill, I think it's going to be a challenge. But the point is that whether it's April 16 or GST gets implemented after a couple of months, it should not matter much to the trade and industry, because as far as they are concerned, they should start preparing themselves for this tax reform. And if GST gets postponed by a couple of months, it should only help them in getting prepared in much more detail than they would have in case the GST gets introduced in April 16. The GST regime, as and when it gets introduced, the rate of GST will be fixed in such a way that it is revenue neutral, which means that whatever is the taxes which are collected by the government today under the existing tax system, the same amount of taxes will be collected by the government under GST also. So on an overall basis, one would assume, or one can safely assume, that the tax impact is going to be the same. But then it is not as simple as it is. Like, what would actually happen is that there will be certain sectors who will be favorably impacted by the GST, and there will be certain sectors who will be adversely impacted by the GST. And our experience is always that one who is adversely affected will immediately pass on the burden to the customers, whereas one who is favorably impacted would wait, watch, and see that the benefit flows into his books of accounts before they pass on the benefit to the customers. So you could see when GST gets implemented, there will be certain sectors which will witness price increases, and the sectors which have to benefit will sort of feel the benefit after some lapse of time. There is one sector where it is very clearly there is going to be an impact on prices, which is the services sector. Today the services are taxed only by the central government. Under the GST regime, the services will be taxed both by the central government as well as the state government. As a result, the service taxes, which are at 14% today, the rate of service taxes will go up somewhere around, say, 18% or 20%. So there will be a steep increase, and you would find or start feeling it by way of increased telephone bills, increased food bills when you dine in a restaurant, increased bills when you buy an air ticket. So like the common man will be able to feel the impact of GST immediately, at least as far as the service sector is concerned. As I told, for the goods sector, like it will be a mixed bag. As far as the industry is concerned, this is a major tax reform, and it's not only a tax reform, it's a business reform, I would say, because GST is going to impact all facets of business, not only the tax part. So as far as the businesses are concerned, they have to ensure that they transition in a seamless manner to the new regime. For that, there are three broad areas which the industry needs to look at. One, of course, is the tax impact. The other one is what is the impact of GST on the finances of the company, their working capital needs, and so on. The other major area of impact would be the supply chain. Today's supply chain of companies are based on the current tax regimes. Under the GST regimes, there will be a paradigm shift, and the companies need to have a relook at the supply chain. And the last but not the least will be the IT system. The companies need to have a look at the IT systems so that they are GST compliant. Unless they take sufficient advance action to set right their IT system, to tune them in line with the requirements of GST, their compliances will pose an issue. So the companies need to look at IT system. So to sum up, the companies have to look at their tax impacts, their supply chain impacts, and lastly, the impact on their IT systems. So these are the three areas which the companies need to look at. And considering the time available, if April 16 is the date on which GST is to come into force, we hardly have much time. And the companies are like advised to sort of start their preparations early so that the transition becomes more smoother. The answer is yes and no. The answer is yes because today's tax system is governed by multiple legislations. As we talked about in the beginning, there are multiple taxes imposed by the federal government and state governments, and these taxes are governed by individual legislations. And with multiple legislations floating around, today there are litigations in each of these areas. So when the GST regime gets introduced, at least the number of legislations which will govern the business will get drastically reduced. So this is one reason why we believe that the number of disputes would come down under the GST regime. But when the transition happens, this is a new tax regime, and the understanding of the industry about this new tax regime will be comparatively less. And also there are certain areas where the rules and regulations will be hazy to start with, and they get clarified as and when industry faces problems and poses the queries to the government. So in the initial period, there could be some sort of a spurt in the litigation, but I think they will all settle down with a responsive government. I think the number of disputes should come down immediately after the first or second year after GST gets introduced.